welcome y'all to the second episode now on the Cardheads YouTube channel. And I am honored to have with me now Brandon Verzal from the Card Life. So I would thank you for coming on. We're going to talk a little bit about the exciting things that he's doing, the work that he's been putting on behind the scenes, and the brand that he's building to help bring more light and just fun to the card hobby. So thank you, Brandon, today for your time.
Greg, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so we've, spoken a little bit now over the past several months, gotten to know each other a little bit. But more importantly, I got to learn about your project that you're currently working on, the cool different aspects of it that, I'll allow you to explain here in a bit. But before that, how about we, just share a little bit about like your background, what kind of initially got you into, sports cards, and how that's kind of matured now over the years here.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, I've collected since I was little. What kind of got me into it more than anything, I was always interested in sports, but I was lucky enough that my grandma kept my dad's cards, and there wasn't anything like extremely valuable. It wasn't a 52 mantle thing, but he had a lot of 1961, 62 postcards, which were literally the cards that they would cut off of Jello boxes in the back of cereal boxes. And I have almost a complete set of those. And like I said, nothing extremely valuable, but that's what kind of sparked my love of the hobby, because there's Mantles and Mays and Clemente and all those names are in those sets. So that's what got me started. I was a junk wax era kid, collected all through, my middle school years and into high school. So in that late 80s, early 90s time period, I have a lot of cards. And then, like everybody else I seem to talk to, you get busy with college and jobs and you step away. And then a couple of decades later, you step back. And the funny thing is I worked in sports. I worked for the University of Nebraska, producing videos for them. I worked for the Tampa Bay Rays, the Seattle Mariners, the Kansas City Royals. I worked for Texas A&M Athletics, and didn't have anything to do with sports cards the whole time I was there. And some of it was you work an 18-hour day sometimes in those jobs, and the last thing you want to do is go home and look at the faces of athletes. So went away from it during that time period, but probably about 12 years ago when I started my own company back here in Nebraska, where I'm from, got back into it again and have been collecting more ever since. And I saw that momentum building in the hobby, but I wouldn't have thought a decade ago I'd be able to produce a TV show about sports cards, but everything just kind of aligned at the right time.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple of points there that I want to touch on. But before going back, you mentioned, how you produce a sports card show for TV now. So why don't we just get a brief breakdown of what it is and how that came about, and then I'd like to go back and ask you a few questions.
Absolutely. So the idea had been building, but I just knew that we've produced TV shows forever. My whole career, I produced TV shows. We independently still produce 3 TV shows. And I knew there was a possibility of doing a show about sports cards, but I knew that if the higher ups at the media organizations that we do those shows for didn't know how popular and how it was a building thing, that they'd never say yes in the first place. And so everything just kind of came together at the right time. All of a sudden, early in 2020, the Wall Street Journal is doing articles on sports cards. ESPN's doing stories on it. It was everywhere. And so I thought that was kind of my time to be able to do that. So I emailed my contacts who run the Bally Sports, all the regional networks for Bally Sports all over the country. And they replied within like 3 minutes and said, yes, let's do a sports card show. And then about 2 hours after that, I direct messaged Matt Strahm, who's a pitcher for the Padres at the time, who's a collector, one of the biggest active collectors in Major League Baseball. Said, do you want to do a sports card show? He said, yep, here's my agent's contact information. Let's do it. And literally within like a week, I had them signed on to air the show. I had a host for the show. And then about 4 months later, we started filming, and we film a different episode every month, and it's released to Bally Sports. It airs on Bally Sports regional networks and also MASN or MASN in DC and Baltimore. So we cover most of the country. It's in like 84 million homes. the great thing about Valley Sports is they have more Major League Baseball, NHL, and NBA teams than any other network family does. And so these shows come on after NBA games, before Major League Baseball games, after NHL games. So I get dozens of emails every week from people that are like, "Hey, I caught your show after the Blackhawks game, and I went down and opened my collection. What's valuable in here?" And so I think we're bringing people that are doing what I did. I went away from it for 15 or 20 years, and then I went back and grabbed my collection, and now I'm all in. And I think that we're building that momentum. I think people in the hobby love the show, but we're also bringing people back into the hobby who did it when they were kids. And all it takes is them seeing a show on a mainstream sports network, and then they get back into it. So I think it's great overall for the hobby. And really, all the show is about is love of the hobby. We'll talk about values of cards, but we're not like talking about buy this player and flip it 30
Right.
days later or 60 days later. That's part of the hobby, and we get
Right.
that. But we're more about telling the stories and talking to the artists and the photographers and the designers and the people who collect. And they're just stories in every city we visit. There's dozens of stories we could tell. And we still have no shortage of stories moving forward over future years.
Yeah, that it the way you describe it is great, and the impact that it's having, it comes across. I watched the last episode, and you guys had the little 9-year old who runs his page, and his dad, videotapes him, and you just see like the energy he has and like the life that he brings to it. And then he went to the hobby shop with Matt, and they did the pack wars, and little man won, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm giving this one to my dad. I'm giving this one to my brother." So it really is. It's just like light-hearted and fun, kind of like refreshing to see. Instead of, like you said, like you can buy this, you might be able to flip it for this next week, or
Yeah.
when the season starts. And you guys also highlighted the photographer in that episode, and that was
Yeah.
really cool
That's
to
the
see how
stuff
that
that's
works.
Yeah, that's the stuff that's unbelievable to me is Nick Wasika is the photographer in Minnesota and has been on hundreds of mainly upper deck NHL cards. But I shouldn't say mainly because he's been on a ton of tops cards as well. But these photographers take these photos, and like Nick, he doesn't know what cards he's going to be on until he breaks the stuff himself, which is nothing I never would have comprehended before. I would have at least thought you got an email saying, "Hey, your
Yeah,
card 33, 57, and 99 in this
right,
set." But he
right,
loves opening up the packs, and he's like, "Oh, that's my photograph. That's my photograph. That's
yeah,
my photograph." I mean, what a cool thing in the hobby. I enjoy opening packs. I can't imagine when there's the potential of one of those being your photo on one of the cards. Just a really cool aspect of the hobby that I never knew was part of it.
yeah, yeah. It makes for an interesting PC, I'm sure.
Yeah,
His PC,
exactly.
I'm sure, ranges, but to your point, it really does like give you insight into like other people that you may not really think about as far as the hobby is concerned, and people behind the scenes that work to like kind of bring it to life, if you will, once you get it in your hands. And that aspect, listening to him explain how he just travels around, and like you said, he goes through and he's like, "Hey, that looks like something I would have shot." He goes through his pictures, he's like, "Yeah, that one is mine." Like that feeling. I'm sure it's similar to like a music artist stopping at a red light and hearing the
Yeah.
guy over listening to it. So that is amazing. Now to kind of bring it back to the beginning stages, you said when you were in college, I believe, and whatnot, you kind of got into the TV production, and it just sounds like you were always angled towards like the sports aspect of TV production. So you want to talk about a little bit about like where that love came from, and what made you want to go into the TV aspect of sports as compared to every other aspect you could go.
Yeah, I loved every aspect of sports growing up. But one thing, especially looking back on it now, that I really, really loved is I would record the intros to the big games. I would record when the Bulls were huge, obviously. I was holding a tape recorder up to my TV to hear what songs they were playing at halftime, at big breaks or after they made a big run. What were they playing to get the crowd excited and stuff? So that entertainment side of things always appealed to me. I laugh. I'm not a fan of it anymore, but I paid attention to wrestling back then. But they were the first sport to do intro music and
Right.
pyrotechnics and stuff like that. And now other sports have obviously embraced that. They were decades ahead of everybody else. But it was, how do you get the crowd excited around these events outside of actually what happens on the field of play? And so I was always excited about that. And then when I was at the University of Nebraska as a student, they had opportunities to work in the athletic department for Husker Vision, which is their video production unit. So I got a job there as a sophomore, and this was during the years where they won national titles and barely ever lost a football game. And got my hands and got to use the very best equipment in the world just because that's what Nebraska had. And we got to do the videos before the team ran on the field, the psych up videos when they had to get the crowd excited on a third down or before a big defensive stand. And that stuff was a blast. That's the thing I do miss about working in that world for all those teams for so many years. Is the great thing about that world is you create content and then it plays in the stadium, and either 90,000 people are going to react or they're not going to react. You get that instant feedback. TV show, you're hoping people are enjoying it, but you're not sitting there and watching it with them.
True.
So that was always the most fun part. I never got to experience a playoff run. I started with the Mariners the year after they won 116 games and assumed they would be in the playoffs every year, but it never quite happened. But that was an awesome environment there. Kyle Field at A&M is one of the most incredible atmospheres in college football. And it was just so much fun to create content and get that immediate feedback over whether people liked it, whether you're making them laugh or cry if it's an emotional thing, or just get excited. I mean, there's nothing better in the world of sports than being able to do that, besides obviously being on the field of play, which I would have chosen before it in any step, but I knew pretty early on that wasn't going to happen.
Awesome. You know what, like listening to you talk about those little video segments, brings me back to, like, there's been so many times where I'm at a game, whether it doesn't really matter the sport, but you see, like, exactly to your point, it would be like a timeout at like a Celtics game, because that's where I'm from. So, and you'll, see like a little video come on where it's one of the players like slapping the ball and say, "Come on, get up." And I always wondered, like, I wonder, like, what goes into that? When are those shot? Like, like who's putting all of that together? So it's cool to now, like, kind of connect those dots and listen to you, talk about what you worked on for the teams. That's interesting.
One of the best stories related to what you talked about is, and sometimes we'll create those videos and they'll sit just waiting for the moment to play them. Back in Nebraska, the year that Eric Crouch won the Heisman Trophy, the year before I had created a video of Crouch that we always wanted to play because we had a play where he perfectly made the Heisman pose. And I had created a video where it kind of froze and then he morphed into the Heisman. Now, this is 20 years ago technology. If I look at it now, I probably would be devastated at what it looked like. But at the time, it looked really cool. Okay. Well, Frank Solich, the head coach, wouldn't let us run it because he thought it was just a little too much to air in stadium. And I was already working for the Royals the next year when Crouch had a really good season, and he had a play against Oklahoma where he caught a pass instead of doing it, and it upset the number one team. And right as soon as he ran into the end zone, the guy who was my boss at Husker Vision, Nebraska said, "Let's run the video. I don't care what coach says, just run it." So they run this video after this monumental play of him turning into the Heisman. And that's the story all over the country from all the writers is, oh my God, they had this video ready of him turning into the Heisman right after this play. And of course he won the Heisman 3 or 4 months later. But when you say that about that thing is sometimes you're just waiting for that moment to occur and it works out perfectly. And in that case, it did work out perfectly, even though I created it a year before and we hadn't been able to use it yet.
Yeah, that's exciting. So I guess let me ask real quick on that before I move on. Have you had like a cool, or what is the coolest kind of like time where you were sitting at a stadium or whatnot and you saw like a video that you created come up like that?
Oh boy, that is a tough one. That Crouch one, I wasn't there, so I can't really take that. One of the cool ones I didn't know at the time is the year that Ripken retired. He announced before the year that Cal Ripken Jr. was going to retire at the end of the season. And at every stadium he went to, they'd play tribute videos for him and give him a gift or something like that. and I was working for the Royals at the time, and I created the tribute video for him, and I thought it turned out well and everything. But afterwards, he sent up a message from the marketing person saying, "That was the best one I've seen. Can I get a copy of it?" And so somebody who's one of the most iconic players of all time asking, saying, "That was a good reflection of my career. Can I get a copy of it?" was probably the highlight of my baseball career. In Seattle, when we had Ichiro, I mean, he is
Yeah.
unbelievable to watch. And so I got to do so many cool videos with him, and somebody who's a great hitter and great defensively, had an incredible arm. Some of the stuff I was able to do there that was just fast and the crowd really reacted to. And the crowd obviously loved Ichiro there. So that would be
Yeah.
kind of the second thing. I wish I would have got experience, playoffs or World Series or something like that. And I never got the chance to do that. But I would say those are kind of the two main things that I
Yeah.
remember.
No, that's really cool. That Cal Ripken story
Mhm.
is pretty cool. Um, with your experience, like working with the athletes and whatnot, for the most part, were they fairly like easygoing and fun to work with as you were filming and kind of directing on, we're gonna do this next, we're gonna do this now.
I'd say with baseball, the nice thing is you film almost all your stuff during spring training, and they're very relaxed during spring
Right.
training. Now, try 2 months later to try to get stuff, and it's kind of a totally different story. But I would say overall, I mean, there may be one or two examples of slight problems I'd have with players of getting them to come in and stuff. The really cool time period you get into is after you've been at a place 1 or 2 years, and those players start to see how good they look on the screen and how the fans react to what you put up there. And then they're starting to say, "Hey, I got an idea. I got an idea of something. I got an idea of something." We did like one of the first years of American Idol, we did an American Idol spinoff where we had Ichiro rapping and Mike Cameron, who was the center fielder, we had him singing. And it was their idea. The players said, "We want to do an American Idol thing," and the crowd just loved it. So stuff like that once they're comfortable that you're trying to make them look good, and the crowd's going to love them more as a
Right.
result of it, then they're pretty easy to work with. I'd say the biggest problem I had in Major League Baseball, and things have changed since then, is umpires were the worst to deal with. Like, back then there were rules that you couldn't show called strikes on the screen. It was illegal to show called strikes. You couldn't show any replays that were controversial at all.
Right.
And so if you did that, you'd get called down to the ump's room. Most of the time they weren't clothed, and they would yell at you like you wouldn't believe. So I would say umpires were a bigger problem than players were throughout my career.
That's hilarious, actually, to listen to. But so from in college and putting these, starting your journey to now, having this your own show that airs, I want to say 300, around 300 times a month on
Yep.
TV.
Yep. Correct.
Very nice. So like, what was that path from working in college, graduating? I'm assuming there was some in between time, and then you kind of took the lead role and now have your own TV show.
Yeah, so I worked out of college. My first job was with the Kansas City Royals, so I was their main production person of producing that in-game entertainment stuff that we talked about earlier. And then went to the Seattle Mariners and was in the same position there. And then me and my wife, who has the same background I do, she produces content and is more of a graphic artist than I am. We both ran that department at Texas A&M, doing all of their sports production for their athletic department. And then in 2008, we moved back to our home state, started our own production company, and we still produce content for college and professional sports teams all over the country. So, Virginia Commonwealth, we just this morning finished, we do their intro video and they needed an update. So we updated the highlights and just sent that out. And so we're doing all that from Lincoln, Nebraska. We still do a lot of stuff for the Nebraska Cornhuskers here locally. And, our production company is mainly in sports and related to sports content. It's not all. We do other corporate nonprofit work. And then about 6 years ago, we started producing these TV shows that were originally on Fox Sports Network, but all the Fox Sports are now Bally Sports. And the model's gone really well. We just do an episode a month, and then it airs over that 30 days, usually 200 to 300 times a month. the Card Life, because it was a sports card show, they didn't know what kind of ratings they were going to pull. And so we were hoping for 100 airings a month to start off, but they're getting good enough ratings that, I mean, it's up to 300 times a month. And I think it's an average of 7 times a day a show airs somewhere in the country. It's just, like I said, it's great exposure for the hobby. And I think card collecting has the ability. I mean, think about fantasy sports and gambling and how those used to be niche things that weren't part of the NFL pregame show. That was, fantasy was what the nerdy guys did even 2 decades ago. And gambling wasn't mentioned at all. So look at how that's grown, and is now almost part of every other segment in those shows. Who's to say that sports cards can't be another wing of that it can't be fantasy and gambling and sports cards, and then just talking about the games themselves? I think that it has the potential to get there, especially because so many people grow up doing it and are coming back into the hobby. I just think interest right now is on its way up, and I think it has the potential to get so much higher.
Yeah, for sure. That makes me think there were games, was it this season or last season, in the NBA, and they had like this little segment where somebody would open up a pack of like hoops cards right on TV, see what players that they got.
Yeah.
I think you're 100% correct. As it gets bigger, as more money comes in, all of these other, outside entities then, start to say, hey, well, look, it's not there's a lot of noise about it. So let's, capitalize off of that noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, Matt, like I said, Matt Strahm, the pitcher for the Padres. We don't know what team he's going to be with this year, but he'll be with somebody. He's an awesome left-handed relief pitcher. So once we get this baseball mess straightened out, it'll be good. But just knowing that, a year and a half ago, he was one of the few people I could identify in the sport that were collecting. And I already know like 24 that he himself have named, that those players are coming up to him and saying, hey, I got into collecting, I've seen your show. And cross sport too. I mean, I drove up from Nebraska to Green Bay and shot with AJ Dillon, the Packers running back. And, he's in his house breaking and shipping cards out and all that stuff, and just loves the hobby. So I think as those athletes further embrace it as well, because you're never going to see those athletes totally fantasy or gambling just because it's going to be frowned upon in any respect. So sports cards could be their thing that more of them embrace, and the more they do, the more you're going to see that opening and that integration. I mean, you see now the announcers doing their fantasy picks for the day before the game. Who's to say they're not saying these are the sports cards that are going to go up after the game today because of X, X, and X. I think that has the potential to exist, and I don't think we're that far away from it.
Yeah. And the other, I know we're kind of going on like a sidebar here, but the other long-term effect that I see it can have is, as the industry is growing right now and more attention comes to it, it makes it, more and more popular. And then the younger generation, gets into it. And so that will carry over then to, I mean, you can almost kind of see it with like AJ, because AJ is very young. And I thought it was really cool to see how he collects his own cards, and collect some of the bigger cards of his own. And I thought it was really cool, almost like a double down on himself, right? Like he believes in what he's doing, obviously, but he's also like buying his own one-of-ones. And you can see, if that continues that way, then this next generation of athletes will grow up, being in it and understanding it and knowing it as like a thing to do. And so when they now become the professionals, it's, like a natural kind of adaptation. And, that overall could end up having a very large impact on, the overall industry.
For sure.
And, where you are, obviously, you have a much better insight into like professional athletes that are into collecting. And so on that point, when you decided that you were going to do the show, Did you already have a relationship with Matt, or it was just someone you knew that was into collecting heavy and just figured, hey, I'll start with you, give you this opportunity, see if you're into it?
Yeah, I knew a few, and it didn't have to be baseball. I collected baseball, so I knew baseball better at the time. But there were a lot of former collectors, the Phil Hughes, the Pat Neshek that collected. But the problem is that when we're going to do a show that's going to be in a different city each month, a lot of those former players aren't going to want to travel. They're happy being home. They don't want to go to a
Right.
different city. But the great thing about an active Major League Baseball player is they're in 3 or 4 different cities every single month. And so, yeah, Matt was the first one I reached out to, and some of it was the reason I wanted an active player, because I knew that we could look at his travel schedule and say, okay, he's going to be in Chicago this month. That's what our show is going to be, is a Chicago show. He was hurt last year, so it got off a little bit, but that's the idea, is that we'll go through and look at his 6-month travel schedule and then match it up with where he's at. And then that'll be a show from that area. The nice thing is, since he's been more in Phoenix rehabbing and in San Diego rehabbing, there's episodes I've done. I did an episode about Nebraska, which was easy for me because that's where I live. But we've been able to just find stories and then make an episode around that story. Like our February episode that's about to come out, we're interviewing the gentleman who created the 1989 Griffey Upper Deck card, one of the most iconic cards of all time. He was 18 years old. He had just got out of college. He was the first employee at Upper Deck, and he's the one that picked Griffey's card and developed what that card is going to be. And so we made a California show around that one story because it's just an awesome story in the hobby. But yeah, kind of going back to Matt, I mean, he's a great host. He loves the hobby. I mean, he's like a kid in a candy store when he's opening up the packs and boxes. A lot of times I don't tell him what he's opening up till he sits down, and then I set the cards on the table, and
Yeah.
and we're able to open up some boxes that are $2,000 or $3,000, which he just loves. And he's just asks great questions. He has the perspective of people who know the hobby inside and out, but also people that might be just getting back. So he'll ask both questions, because we kind of have to hit two audiences. We have to be appealing to people in the hobby, but we also have to appeal to the general viewer who just happens to stumble upon the show after a hockey game or an NBA game. And Matt just does a great job with that. And we're looking forward to getting into the flow of a season, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun to go to some of those road cities and do shows there.
Yeah, I saw you guys grabbed a couple Brady rookies out of that
I
last
know.
episode. That
He's
was
had
awesome.
he's had some great stuff. He pulled a Montana rookie recently. He pulled a Duncan rookie, and in the same one, I think it was Kobe's second year, they had these minted in Springfield cards, and he pulled that, and he was just beyond the moon. And then the funniest one is, we were opening a pack of his rookie card Chrome year, a box, and he pulled his own autograph rookie. It's like there's
Oh, that's
one
cool.
guaranteed auto in the box, and of all things, he pulls his own one out. So that was really, really cool. I look forward to the breaks every month, and you'll hear me laughing in the back. He's funny when he opens them, and so you'll hear me cackling at his comments all the time in the background. But we're the only two people in the room, so he pretty much is just talking to me as we're doing the show.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's been some of the feedback, whether that's from like the audience or from the network itself? What's been some of um like the sentiment on, how people feel about it and kind of where you think it could go from here?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I hear that just the story side of it is what people really enjoy. They enjoy hearing the stories about the hobby. We interviewed Terry Smith, who created the Provision set from Fleer in the early 90s. So it's like Dwight Gooden with the ball on fire, and Joe Montana had like a robotic arm, and it was a really iconic set for that time period, kind of the first art cards. And the number of people who messaged after that and said that was my favorite set from that period of collecting, and I had no idea how trend setting it was to what's done today. And I didn't even know who created it, and just loved learning about something from their childhood and what the process was of creating that. So I hear a lot on that story side. And then the second side, like I said, I get more emails than anything else of people. I watch your show, I'm so fired up about collecting again. I just pulled out my box. What is valuable in here? And that's
Having trouble managing your valuable collection and finding price transparency in the sports card market? Me too. That's why I use CardHedge. CardHedge is a brilliant price analysis and collection management tool. Track all your grades across PSA, CSG, HGA, SGC, BGS, and as well as your raw cards. CardHedge pulls their research from sites like eBay, StarStock, MySlabs, and Golden Auctions. You want an accurate picture of the sports card market? Yeah, me too. With over tens of thousands of cards in their system, CardHedge is the definitive sports card price guide. Quickly search by card, player, or set. Sort by price or percentage change. It has a lot of awesome advanced features. So what are you waiting for? Join today for only $14.99.
of course a hard thing to answer, especially the people that collected in the late 80s.
Right.
But there's stuff in there to go through, and all it takes is you going through and finding 2 or 3 things, and you kind of get hooked pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, is I think it's sparking that interest in going back and going through your old collection, and we hope from there that you become a permanent part of the hobby. And any medium, anything you're highlighting, whether it's sports cards or anything else, if you tell good stories, people are going to be interested. My sister watches the show every month. She has no interest in sports cards, but she loves the story side of it and finds it interesting. And that's the thing that we want to appeal to, is people may not be into sports cards, are going to get into sports cards, but they enjoy the show anyways.
Yeah, which is amazing. That's awesome. So with having that, and all the other stuff that you have going on as far as working with other teams, do you still find time to collect some cards for yourself here and there?
Unfortunately, some of it is you go do this stuff there, and then the first thing you want to do is go buy a box of, and I can't go buy the $3,000 box that I had Matt open on the show, but maybe I'll buy a pack from that. But yeah, I'm still really into it. I buy a lot of just whatever new product comes out. I enjoy buying. I kind of got into that ripping vintage cards before it exploded and got really expensive.
Yeah.
Back when you had the potential of getting a Bird Magic rookie and you could buy a pack for $200 or $300, and now that doesn't exist anymore. But do breaks a lot. Loop is our sponsor, and they almost make it too easy. You get onto Loop and a card pops up and you click one button, and the next thing you know, they're opening it for you and shipping it to your house. So I do that more than I probably should. And I really just collect everything. I've never sold a card in my life. That's one thing. Both me and Matt are in the same boat. Neither one of us had ever sold any of our cards. We just ingest them. Someday may come where we want to do that, but both of us are collectors and just love the hobby.
Yeah. Any players that you've been hot on recently?
Oh boy, not a lot of ones that other people aren't into. I started collecting a lot of Bobby Witt Jr. He's playing in Omaha just up the road and has been. Hopefully he'll be in Kansas City this year.
Yeah.
So I've grabbed a lot of Bobby Witt Jr. One thing I went back and collected, my cousin, which we look nothing alike, so it's a long story, but Miles Austin Jr. played for the Dallas Cowboys in the 2000.
Yeah, he was
2008.
Good.
Yeah, he set the receiving record for the Cowboys in a game. So his mom, my mom, both grew up in O'Neill, Nebraska. And so I've gone back and tried to grab some of his cards. I grabbed the highest graded rookie auto he had. It was like a pristine, and just trying to collect the rainbow and stuff of all his cards. But it's been fun to go back and do that. And the nice thing is once a player like that retires, it's not going to be a Hall of Famer. You can go on to ComC and buy 18 versions of his cards for $40 and have a pretty cool collection going. So I've always enjoyed that. I still collect Ichiro just because my time in Seattle, that was the guy. Yeah, that was the guy there. But yeah, a little bit of everything, mainly baseball more than anything. But, just like anybody else, when a new product comes out and you have the chance of getting a hot NBA rookie or NFL rookie, I'll go grab some packs and boxes. I don't have the ability to hold it. Like I don't know how the people that buy boxes and packs and set them off to the side and hold them for 4 or 5 years, because I don't have the ability to do that. I open it immediately. I wish I had the willpower to, but I don't think I'm ever gonna be able to do that.
Yeah, well, at least you know yourself. That's the first part of the battle. Exactly. That's awesome. Yeah, I actually I've done that with a few guys from Massachusetts, like Pat Connington, actually a kid that went to the same high school I went to. His name is Dan Langfield. He was a prospect pitcher for the Reds for a while. He ended up messing up his arm, but he was really, really good. He was one of their top, I want to say at one point he was like their top rated pitcher in the farm. But stuff happens, unfortunately. And he was really good friends with my brother. They played baseball together. So it's been cool to go back and like buy his Bowman autos and the rainbow and whatnot. Just
that's the cool thing
right.
is like, and I was just going through some of my cards yesterday, and I have so many of them that I wish I need a platform, and they exist, but I just need to take the time to do it, because I know there's people out there that would love that one of 5 of a guy who's not in the league anymore, but that's his best card or one of his best cards.
Yep.
And that's one of the really cool things about it, is you can grab people like that aren't necessarily the big names, but they mean a lot to you to be able to collect them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have a little part of my collection that's like that, just guys from Massachusetts that, made it baseball, basketball, football, whatever. So that's cool. I can relate big time on that. All right. Well, I said I didn't want to take too much of your time. So you've given me a good amount of it here. And, it was really cool to hear about, the interactions you get to have out on the road, the feedback that you get, the way that it seems that, the show is helping to invigorate some people or reinvigorate some people back into, the hobby. Because obviously I'm sure when you set out to make it, that was the overall goal. So it's nice to hear that it seems like you're going above the goal that you set out for. So well done on that.
I appreciate that. It's just such a great community. I mean, so much good stuff happens every day. And yeah, there are bad stories that pop up, but the number of good far outweighs the bad. And the number of people in all these cities we visit that are just passionate about the hobby and passionate about sports cards. I mean, every single month gets you excited about where we're at and where the future is in sports cards, because it's in a good place, and it's going to be in an even better place in the near future.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And just for people who are watching, when does the next episode come out? You said February?
Yeah, so we release the episode on the 15th of every month. You can see our broadcast schedule on the cardlifetv.com, and you click broadcast schedule on the top and you'll see where it is in your area. There's some regions that air it 12 times a month. There's some that air it 30 times a month. So it kind of depends on where you're at. And then after we air it for the first time, 30 days later, it's available on our YouTube page too. So all of our episodes that are more than a month old are on YouTube, and you can watch them at any time.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will make sure that I put a link to the website and also to your YouTube channel down in the description. And want to thank you again for your time taken here today. And thank everybody for stopping by and checking this out. And please, everybody, go follow the Card Life. Check out their episodes. They're doing great stuff. Really just bringing lighthearted fun back to, not back, but kind of bringing it to people so that they can come back into the hobby. So thank you, everybody, for stopping by, and I'll see you around.